The Athene Real Talk Podcast explores controversial ideas to stimulate debate and active thinking. These ideas do not always reflect Athene's personal views. Welcome to the Athene Real Talk Podcast.
He has been called the best gamer in the world, hands down.
World-famous gamer and philanthropist Athene.
Gaming for Good, it's called, has raised more than $20 million.
Using his notoriety to raise money for charity.
On activism, science, culture, and self-development.
Proud to have him in the studio today. I would not want to take you on in a video game.
First, to give you guys a little bit of history, in the past I always talk to Reese like, okay, my brain is not working fundamentally different. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I'm not that intelligent. How come my working memory is so much larger than anyone else I know in my life?
Right, because if we have complex conversations or you're dealing with a very complex issue or whatever, it's like you have a perfect recording of the whole conversation in your mind, and you can really, like, at the end of the conversation go to a tiny detail mentioned in the beginning, saying like, but there you said this, so that means that, boom. Yeah.
And I can also do it with your conversation today, conversation last week, conversation a month ago.
Right.
Basically, I just remember what people say almost like clear, sharp. And the thing is, when it comes down to these kind of things, you can wonder, okay, like you just, you have some kind of crazy memory capabilities that is just genius level, because it's the only explanation I can give. But I don't feel like that. I never felt like I'm really very talented when it comes down to memory and stuff, but I didn't understand why people had so much issues, and I figured out what the thing is. I will give you guys a little brief history. Since I was very young, like I had a lot of warmth of my mother, so my self-esteem is quite high, and since I was 8 years old, I had conversations with my brother and his friend about the universe and stuff, and from very young age, I wanted to actually, make sense. It's crucial to understand it, because when you understand it, you will go like, okay, now I understand how he thinks. So basically, all this making sense stuff that I talk about, I had that literally before my puberty. When I was really young, I said being logical and being rational and making sense basically was the most powerful way of going about life, because it allows me to build the strongest foundation based on logic and rationality. Either way, you might say okay, we know that already. What does that have to do with memory? So basically, the way I work with memories is I don't memorize things. And you might say what the fuck you talking about? You don't memorize things. I think in logical checkpoints. And it's very important to really think about it. Basically, whenever I'm in a conversation, even when I'm talking to Reese or when I talk to someone, to Katarina, to Tanya, whatever, I have an agenda. I have a place, a direction where I want to go, and I just check logical checkpoints. It's very important to understand this, because if you don't fully wrap your head around, it might come across very vague. Most people, when they talk impulsively. They talk without a strong direction. I talk always with a direction, because it has to make sense. So basically, when I'm in a conversation, I immediately go I want this, and this is what I'm going to do, these checkpoints. And what I do is I talk around the checkpoints. But when the person tells to me something, he can tell something very complex. I only store the logical checkpoints. So let's say Reese has an entire conversation about me, about girls, and blah, blah, blah. I just compromise the information to his point, and that's all I store. And then when I talk about it, I just load the point and I talk around the point. It's like the walls. I don't store the textures of the walls. I just store the geometry, and then I paint them with the conversation. So that's why also I mix up names easily, because I don't store names.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter so much for the logic.
Yes, it doesn't matter for the logic. I only store the logic. And as a result, when you start doing that, whenever you have a conversation, you always boil it down to the logical checkpoint. I call it logical checkpoints. Maybe there's another way of naming it. But I only comprise the information to the logical point. I store that. And that's the only dots I have. So of course I can start, because the checkpoints, the logical checkpoints, is just very small. It's not so much. People can talk over and over and over again about the same thing, and I still have the same point. And as long as it doesn't change the logical point, the information that he gives me doesn't even get absorbed, because it's besides the point. And as a result, I can remember what people said even a year ago, the points people made, because it's so little information.
And that's why people can really talk a lot, and it can sound very complex what someone is saying. But since you have a really good filtration system as to what is relevant to the checkpoints that you're looking at and what is not, the information you will distill is very, very on point.
Yes.
And all this complexity disappears.
Yes.
Good question. Sabrina says, don't you also add vivid images to those memories to create... No,
nothing. I don't have that. I literally only store the logic. And that's why I can't watch movies twice.
Yes, of course.
Because I store the plot.
The logic.
The logical plot.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yes.
I can't rewatch it because that's the only thing I do.
Yes.
It's literally how I store information. I don't have a visual brain at all. That's how I think.
Yes, that makes sense.
And the thing is, the reason why I store like that, and this is the crazy shit, the reason why I store like that is because since I was young, really a child, I wanted to make sense. It doesn't make sense to store all the bullshit. And the brain automatically starts concising and compressing information. Just like now, there's studies came out that people don't learn so much what they read, but where to find it. The brain works differently. Children 20 years ago, before the internet, stored information differently. We more and more start storing information by knowing where to find it. And that's what I did since I was a very young kid. I just started storing information differently. And that's why I'm so good at making connections. It's not so much because I have an insane working memory, it's how I store the information.
But man, brains can work fundamentally so differently. For example, if I implement, because this sounds really effective, and if I treat a conversation like this, I try to do this, what you do, it's actually, even though I'm trying to do the same thing, it'll be a completely different process for me. Because I will actually visualize checkpoints. I will actually visualize a wireframe. I don't know how else to do it.
No, I don't do that. It's about you listen to the conversation, right? And you compress it. What is the point this person is trying to make? And you store that. But yeah, like I'm auditory brain, I don't think visually. When people speak, they load up their working memory with what I say and how I say it and pictures and all that shit. And of course they can't, like, I have a conversation with them for 2 minutes and they already don't know what I said the first minute. But if you store things with logical checkpoints, then you basically can keep track of the entire conversation and make connections all the time. And it's the same when I read text. I only store the logical checkpoints. And some people, I remember like some people say like, yeah, how do you go about knowing all these things? It's because I always look for the logical checkpoints. And I think you can teach this, by the way.
Yes, to greater or lesser extent, for sure.
Yeah.
It's very straightforward.
It's the way you store information. People store irrelevant, redundant information. You only store the logical point. And when I say I store the logic, I literally say I store the logic. I don't store phrases.
Okay.
It's just logic.
It's
almost math.
I get that.
Like for me, it's math. It's not even like I see the logic in what people say.
Yes.
So I don't think like, oh, that's what he said. No. The logic behind the words. XX says, because of recent terror attacks, I've been discussing racism, religion, and refugee crisis. These are all topics which tend to end with someone and me being triggered. How can we avoid this? We both want to have a rational discussion about it, but it is not easy. Wrath at XX, let me tell you, don't talk about it. It's a waste of time. Everybody talking about refugee crisis and racism and terrorist attacks, it's a waste of time. I'm saying it right now. Everybody going around talking about it, you are wasting your time. Do something productive. Don't go about and talk about these things, these issues you don't even have influence over. Just some intellectual masturbation, that's what it is. It's keyboard warriors. IRL or on the forums. It doesn't do shit. You want to do something about it? Start voting with your money. Start thinking more, rational. Start making sense. Work out, eat healthy, meditate, sleep enough, be proactive, make a difference. Talking about these topics is a waste of time. You're part of the problem when you do that. That's what I have to say about that. When people start talking about refugees and terrorism or whatever, I just think yeah. People talk around about terrorism. There's more people dying every day in other scenarios where something you can actually do about. It's just propaganda. That's what it is. You might say, but these people died. Yeah, people die. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. But honestly, from a world awareness view, there's a lot more worse things happening. And then you might say yeah, but that doesn't make it so you cannot see these things and go hey, this is bad. No, of course not. But if these other things that are happening daily don't keep you busy and it's actually stuff you can do something about, then you're quite a hypocrite. That's what I gotta say. Because you can start donating to organizations that save people every day. You might say well, yeah, that's how it is. And the funny thing is, by doing so, you actually even take away the cause that is causing the terrorist attacks. Terrorist attacks are caused by a lot more political... The situation is much more complex than what people understand. It's not just some crazy evil guys coming here blowing themselves up. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot more stuff to it. But it's very easy to think black and white. It's just very easy to just, frame things very simple. Oh, these are the bad guys, these are the good guys. Things are much more complex than that. And the more you dig in things, the more you start realizing that everyone on the planet is a bit of the bad guy and a bit of the good guy. And the extent to which you can change yourself in more to be the good guy than the bad guy for yourself is the way forward. And not going around and pointing fingers saying this guy is bad, this guy is bad, this guy is good. Because that's not how the world works. And that's true wisdom. And the moment you realize that, instead of talking every day, instead of going around and trying to be interesting and going like, oh, look at me, look at my opinions, you start acting upon your morals in a way that contributes to the world. It's very easy to shout on the side to make yourself feel better. It's a total other story to actually be there and make a difference. And that's something you can do every day with every action you do. That's my advice about that. Turako says, Athene, can I ask why you care about the future of mankind? In which way is it logical to do so? In reality, we are just creatures like any other meaningless part of the universe. No, it's flawed logic. And let me tell you where the flaw is. The flaw is that you're using another reference frame than what you are. Your existence is what should be the reference frame rather than a universe that is a concept within your existence. And the moment you start, understanding your existence and understanding how you evolve to become what you are, you start realizing that your sole ability to even ask the question is actually the answer as well. Purpose and why we are here, the reason why that exists is because we have grown and evolved to a point where we can ask that question. But if you take away purpose from its existence, it's not something where you compare it with no purpose, and that's what you are doing. You're actually saying there is no purpose. So you're basically already going about purpose in a way that you have conceptualized it. When you take away the existence of purpose altogether, it's just like taking away, for example, vision. Blind people doesn't see black. When you see stuff and you imagine yourself things that you can't see, you think black, right? But you compare what you see with what you can't see. But someone that is blind doesn't even know the concept of seeing. It's like a blind person sees as much as you can see through your elbow. And when you start realizing that, you start understanding that the concept and the existence of purpose is connected with what you are. So you can't just go like, the universe has no purpose, and therefore you're basically completely missing the point, because the concept of purpose even gets its color because of you. You take yourself out of the equation, and the concept of purpose doesn't even exist. And the moment it doesn't even exist, even the universe might not even exist when you take your existence out of the equation. Because it's your existence that brings about a time interval and an experience. Take that away from the equation, the universe might not even exist the way we experience it. So even if you take the universe as a reference frame, even that is flawed. And the moment you start seeing it, you go like, oh, wait a minute. So the purpose is defined by what we are. And then suddenly everything I say falls into place. You start working, of course it makes sense to do what we do because that's what we are. Tureko, Athene, but after you die, why does it matter what happens in the world after you're gone? You're not gonna witness anything. Tureko, it's because you have a wrong idea about the self. You think the self is your body and your mind. No, the self is more than that. Your ability to even have these thoughts go back 1 million years, 1 billion years, actually 13.6 billion years, your ability to think. So if you start going and just putting a little circle in, this is who I am, from when I'm born until I die, you just have no idea about what you are. What you are is much more than that. What you are is everything you experience, your environment, everything. That's what you are. And the moment you start realizing that and you start looking at it from that perspective, you understand that you are not your body or your mind, you're more than that. Your mind is interconnected with everything around you, and that goes back 13.6 billion years ago. It's a flawed paradigm of the self that is making you think like, I died. What is dying? What is living? What is that? Like when you start thinking about these concepts, you just start seeing them decay because you're ever changing. Every single minute, every single instance, you're a different individual and different entity. Your neural activity shifts all the time. When you start looking at your cells, your own cells, right? They die all the time. When you start looking at the atoms that bring about who you are, even the neurons, they pop in and out of existence all the time. Your concept of the self, of this stable, consistent self, is an illusion because you're ever changing. And this ever-changing has been going on for 13.6 billion years. And if you disconnect that because of a flawed concept of this is who I am, you're going about it in the wrong way because that's not what you are. You are much more than that. And the moment you realize that, you disconnect from this wrong, flawed idea of the self and you start looking at it from a bigger perspective or from a selfless point of view. The self does not exist. Everything you are is just part of the selfless. Turako says, but previously you said I should look from the perspective of my consciousness and not globally as the universe. That's a bit hypocrite, I feel like. No, I feel like the way you're asking the question and the way you bring it up shows more ego than anything else. It's very important when you talk about these things that you talk about it from the right perspective, because else the motivation to give arguments is not one that stimulates growth or understanding, but rather one where you want to make a point. And I will address your question, but it's very important because that's the issue. That's the underlying issue. The underlying issue is you feel like, these ideas don't fully merge with what you think. You experience dissonance and you're triggered. And that's why you're putting it that way. And that's why you're not fully absorbing what I say, because you're more closed. But if you truly listen and you understand, then you understand that's not even what I said. It's about references. Your reference frame is your consciousness, no matter how you look at it. And your consciousness is what you are. But your consciousness goes back 13.6 billion years. If it wasn't for everything that has happened, your consciousness, the way you experience it, wouldn't even exist. So if you want to understand what you are, you got to go back and understand all these things. So it's not like I'm saying like, oh yeah, you can't look at the universe, you can't look globally. These things allow you to have a better understanding of the self, but you cannot disconnect your own consciousness from the equation. So it's not hypocritical, it's just pure logical. But if you have that mindset of trying to criticize without listening and using the language you use, you're basically undermining your ability to learn from these insights and this information. And the reason why I'm saying it, because that is 99% the case in discussions. People just want to hear their own opinion and they don't absorb the information. And they go about it in a wrong way. I've said it many times and I repeat myself. It's important when people talk about topics, they understand why they think and why they are motivated to say things in a certain way, because a lot of the time why they're even typing the question and why they're even entering into a discussion is actually completely different than what is asked or what is said, and as a result it's besides the point. The point is either validation seeking or ego trigger or dissonance of beliefs not being merging. But if you're truly listening, that's when you truly can learn and grow as a person. That's why I said this should be the focus. It's learning and growing. It shouldn't be trying to make a point or whatever. And your language shows that your intentions are not fully, in line with wanting to learn. So that's why I'm addressing it, because if you don't understand that, you will just keep saying random stuff just to disagree. It's very important to be aware of that. It's the underlying dynamics of why you're asking the question. You should think about it. When you want to type a question, why are you doing it? Why is everybody chatting? A lot of people that are chatting, a lot of them are doing it for the wrong reasons. They're not asking questions because they want an answer. A lot of people that are asking questions, they're doing it because they want validation. They just want their question to be read out loud. That's why most of the people that end up coming over here are lurkers. It's very important to be aware of these mechanics. So Zex99, I will tell you something. It's actually something very interesting. Jealousy has a lot to do with trust. And the funny thing about trust is if you don't trust someone because you think he can fuck you over, then trying to make that person not fuck you over by showing your distrust does the opposite effect either way. So not trusting and even jealousy is literally a flawed way of going about things within our society nowadays. Maybe 1,000 years ago, jealousy was handy. You'd go like, oh, if you do this, I shoot you in the head or I chop your head off or whatever. But nowadays, jealousy is really like a counterproductive feeling. And let me tell you why. Because by distrusting someone, like if you don't trust a person that you want to trust, you're basically contradicting yourself, because by not trusting the person, you're actually creating a scenario where him showing trust or whatever doesn't matter anyway. So it's literally a flawed concept that comes from you doubting yourself. It's not so much you don't trust the person or you're jealous about the person, it's you have low self-esteem and you question yourself. And you're trying to make up for it. So jealousy and not trusting within a relationship, for example, is rather a result of low self-esteem. Because if you don't have low self-esteem and you're very confident about yourself, trust doesn't matter anymore. Like you just see things for what they are. And if shit happens, shit happens. If shit doesn't happen, shit doesn't happen. And your ability to cope with this situation is what brings about the best course of action either way. And if you're jealous, you're literally increasing the chance of the person leaving you. If you don't trust a person, you literally create a scenario where that person, if he then acts against what you want, you're basically just having him act in line with what you think. So giving people the benefit of the doubt and trusting them, of course based on facts, is the only thing you can do. So it's not about distrusting, it's about giving the benefit to trust. And if you don't trust, then it's basically just something you just act upon in a very rational way. But the problem is a lot of people are very confused and they don't understand these concepts, and they go through life in a very duality state where they see a person, they go like, yeah, I'm together with that person, I don't trust you. But like, let's say you're in a relationship with me and you don't trust me, right? Then basically by not trusting me being able to do whatever the fuck I want that would hurt you or whatever is already within your definition. It's only when you trust me that you are in a position where you put yourself in a weak spot. If you don't trust me and you use that as a leverage to gain more trust, that on itself is contradictory. You can't use a no trust attitude to gain trust. And a lot of people do that. And it makes no fucking sense. It's like you can't be jealous to actually make a person more loyal. By being jealous, you make it worse. It's literally the kind of fucking stupid emotion that people have. Jealousy and not trusting people within a relationship from an emotional biased way is just absurd. You either don't trust the person because you have strong reason to not trust him, and as a result you just go about it in a very clear-minded, detached way, or you trust the person because you give the benefit of the doubt. But not trusting because you have low self-esteem and you try to gain trust by going like, oh, I don't trust you so much, like please prove me, it's just bullshit. It's absurd, and I see it a lot. I see people do that a lot. It makes no sense. So yeah, what I'm just trying to say is it's flawed. It doesn't make any sense. It's flawed. But it's really crazy. Like, it's really crazy. I see people, relationships, good relationships, being destroyed because of jealousy and no trust. I see relationships get destroyed by it. And I just facepalm and I say like, but why? Like, but the problem is not the no trust. The problem is not the jealousy. The problem is low self-esteem. It's not believing in yourself. It's having low confidence. It's not trusting yourself, because you yourself are quite selfish and have not really fully, pure intentions. Your intentions are not good, and as a result you project that in the other person. By not trusting in a relationship and going about it, it says more about you than about your partner. Because if it's about the partner, if you don't trust the person, why are you together with him? Of course, at the start you can be a little bit skeptical and such, but not trusting as an emotion, jealousy as an emotion, makes absolutely no fucking sense. It says more about you than about the person. That's why I go about life. I trust people with required information. I give people the benefit of the doubt. I trust them, and you know why? Because in my trust, I already pay the interest if the person fucks me over. It's already in my trust. So when I give someone trust, I give them also like insurance policy. If they backstab me, it's on me. And I already talked about it also yesterday. The way I go about things is I always try to relate things to myself. If someone breaks my trust, it's not their fault, it's my fault. But since I already gave him the credit for it anyway, I go like, yeah, it was part of the risk. And that's life. If I have to trust 100 people and only 2 people end up working out, was that worth it? If so, then I would trust. If that's not worth it, then of course not. In this situation, people come over quite frequently. There's people that I trust that break trust. But at the end of the day, I just look at that and I go like, okay, that's how it is. It's part of trust. You can't just trust someone and then assume that if it's broken, that it's their fault. No, it's part of the bargain. It's part of the equation. It's a risk you take. And if you understand that fully, if you fully understand and grasp that, you trust someone, you take into account, you forgive him for already fucking up. If you forgive the person for breaking the trust, when you trust someone, you can much easier trust people, and you can much more easily build a life that is more fulfilling. Of course, when you go around people that are all selfish and think about money, trusting is really hard and you're going to have a hard time. And I would advise you not to trust so many people. But when you're in a situation where you're in an environment where people don't show you any reason to distrust them, don't go through life like a fucking distrustful guy, because it eats away your own reason to live. Meaning and purpose and connection is very connected to your environment. If you trust nothing, then why are you here? Just to fulfill yourself until you die? No, that doesn't make sense. That's not why you're here. It's like a cell distrusting the entire body. Why would it still be doing its function? Trust is very important. I also talk about it in the book. I want to say something about League of Formats. Says Athene, if we are more worthy of progress than if we encounter another species that is 50 times our progress, then that would mean it's okay for them to just disregard us and just use us, or maybe our planet. Yes and no. The thing is, the more advanced you become, the more you are backwards compatible, the more you respect previous species. That's why I don't eat meat. That's why I'm not killing animals to eat them. It's a way connected with me having higher awareness. And being backwards compatible is actually in line with evolution. Just as we take care of our weaker, we have evolved to take care of our weaker because it allows us to thrive even more. Why does America not go in war with Russia? Even though Russia is weaker than America, it's because of MAD, mutual assured destruction. If you are an alien species and you want to evolve, the first thing you realize is not being backwards compatible is a threat to yourself and to your advancement. Because by advancing, the more advanced parts will start destroying the lesser advanced. And that way you're literally a threat to yourself. So you don't need a 5-neuron brain to understand that being backwards compatible is actually in line with keeping your own self assured, your own existence assured. I find that actually fascinating that Stephen Hawking says we shouldn't contact aliens because they will destroy us. It doesn't work like that. If aliens would destroy us, then more advanced aliens coming from these aliens will destroy these aliens. It's actually insurance policy to be backwards compatible. It's like us going around and start killing old people. Just going and shooting them. You're 60 years old, you shoot them. You're basically shooting yourself. Because when you become 60 years old, they're going to shoot you. So of course you're not going to go around and shoot 60-year-olds. It's a little bit, it's just a metaphor, but it's a simple way of wrapping your head around. If you progress and move forward, the best thing you do is be backwards compatible. I find that actually fascinating that, people don't make that connection. But the reason why that is because people have fear. The reason why people have fear is because people are more primitive. We just evolved from really primitive mammals and we're becoming more intellectual capable, but we're still quite stupid, to put it that way. And that's why we have these warped ideas and concepts, because we don't even understand consciousness that well and how our brain works. But if we understand it, then being backwards compatible is just purely logical. Gnashirus says, does it make sense to have hope? Gnashirus, it definitely makes sense. And let me tell you why. There is studies that show that if you are positive about things, that the outcome is more likely to be positive. I'm a very positive person and I have a lot of hope. If it wasn't for my hope and my positive mindset, I would not be where I am now. Honestly, when I grew up, I've always had in my life people try to bring me down, including my family and my friends. They always say, like, what are you thinking? What do you think you're going to change? Everything is going to stay the same. Why do you think? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Forget about it. It's going to fail. Every time in my life, I had people tell me that I will fail. But because I kept believing in who I am and what I stand for and understood and had confidence and intellectual strong framework and I made sense, I grew above it. And I kept trying and kept fighting. I never gave up. I never give up, and that's why I'm here where I am now, starting a fucking movement that might change the world. And I already changed the world a little bit. I know raising some money for the kids is not going to change the world, but step by step. And I keep believing. And the reason, if it wasn't for me hoping or believing, I wouldn't even have these streams. The reason why I do these streams is because I believe in you. I believe you can grow to become someone that really is, more sensical, more logical, and actually contributes to the world. I'm here talking to you because I believe in you. If I wouldn't believe in you, I wouldn't waste my time. Could be doing sellout streaming, milk you for cash instead. Oh, silence. It's actually a good question, and I'll tell you, maybe this story will help you. We had a neighbor, and he died. He was old, and every day he was in front of the door, looking blank outside, because he was lonely as fuck. And then he died, and we went to help out to move the stuff out of it. And I was inside the house and I saw all these things he had. All these things, like the pictures, the statues, the little things. And it was all being thrown in garbages. And I was just like, all the stuff this guy found so important and probably would even, get depressed or whatever, it's just being thrown because it's worthless. And because he probably didn't value the right things, he was looking outside with his blank stare every day because he had no purpose, no goal. And then I'm going to ask you the question, what kind of person do you want to be? Kind of guy that is attached to all this fucking bullshit that doesn't matter, doesn't mean shit? or the one that, you know, wants to go for purpose and actually do something with your life.
Subscribe to youtube.com/AtheneWins. Watch the live stream at twitch.tv/AtheneLive and follow The Real Athene on Snapchat.